my name is Andrew Spencer, and my role is Head of Procurement and Supply Chain within Skanska for our Highways division. Liz, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the Key Account Manager for Highways England with Skanska, so yeah, more commonly known as Andrew's partner in crime.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. This whole session today, you are going to see a few amount of slides. I'm hoping about 5 in total. Delivery of how these sessions want to be run and how we've had some really great conversations with partners all the way across the supply chain, from client organisations to contractor organisations to partners in supply chain to industry experts and wider. An open session, an open forum. We want engagement. We want people to speak up. There is no daft question. There's no stupid comment. There's no nothing of the sort. This is the session to get involved and speak and give your views, because that's, I think, how we all improve as a sector and an industry. So this session is all about building a reputation on values and behaviours, and we've got some experts on the call who's going to join, and we're going to have some conversation to explain what they're doing and what their views are. And there will be a good Q&A session at the end of this, where we want people to turn their cameras on and get involved and really get involved in some of the conversations to take this a bit further as to where we can be. For anybody that's new to the Be Better Together Partner Forum, we've had, this is number 4 in the session so far. In February, we had one on social value, which we looked at the topic of social value across supply chains and partners, which was a fantastic session. I was really buzzing after coming out of that session, and the amount of engagement our people was involved in social value was fantastic. Back in October in 2020, we had a session which was focused on Black History Month, which was really eye-opening for me, and I know a lot of other people, and the comments and feedback I've had was eye-opening in terms of our whole world, so that was fantastic. And then we started this back in September of 2020, which seems like a long while ago, where we had the launch session and tried to get people on board to join us on this journey. And it's good to see now the people on the chat. There's lots of returning names and faces and all that kind of stuff. So there must be something in this which is worthwhile. So thank you. And thank you to the newbies as well. This is as much as of house rules as we've pretty much got. The first probably few bits will be just remain muted if you can while listening, just because of background noise and everything else. And I'm happy to hear dogs and children and love it, and you'll probably see mine walking in soon. Just try and keep it on mute if we can, because people are in office environments. You don't need your camera on, but if you want to turn your camera on, go for it. We will actively encourage it during the Q&A sessions and want people to come on screen and see them, but just to try and keep some of the speakers just a bit of privacy, that'd be great. And comments, we want your comments, questions in the chat function. Please use it, and that's how we'll use the Q&A. I've already dropped a comment in there and got a couple of volunteers for the moments in a second. We will have a comfort break, as commonly known in Skanska and Sweden as a fika. If you don't know what a fika is, Liz will explain it.
It's like coffee and cake, although we're not providing the cake today, unfortunately. So maybe
no coffee or cake
in person.
So thank you for that. And then afterwards, we'll be looking for your feedback. Just a quick short post survey, just to really try and help us shape these sessions going forward and check we're not only hitting the spot for ourselves, but for our partners on the call. Is this got the right format, and also to help shape the agenda for the next sessions. So that's enough ramblings from me, and we'll go into, this is what the agenda looks like. We'll do a safety and values moment. We've got a couple of volunteers, and we'll do that in 2 seconds. And then we're going to build on to building reputation. So Liz is going to just host a session with Vicky from Britain Thinks, who's a founding partner, and Martin Perch from Highways England. And we're going to explore all things from an industry level and from a sector level about behaviours and reputation and building on these topics. Liz will do some conversations and discussions about what that means and what the flow comes. We'll have a bit of fika, and then we'll come back to hear from a couple of the supply chain partners. So Kira will talk about her experiences within VGC and what it means from a supply chain partner, and the same from Rob and what he's seeing with the work they're doing with Lynch Plant Hire. And then we'll aiming to have a good half-hour Q&A at the end to get as many experiences, as many ideas as possible. So that's the agenda. That's what we're going to do. You'll be pleased to know that's the end of the slideshow for today. nothing else to see. There will be a couple of polls come in. I think Liz has just launched the first one. Forgive us if the IT worked, but it doesn't work, but I'm hoping it will. So please answer the polls questions if you can, that pop up in the comments box. And we'll move into a safety moment. A safety moment is traditional within Highways England, and it's something we always do at the start of meetings. And I believe Nancy volunteered to give us a safety moment. Here she is.
Yeah.
Hi, Nancy. Okay.
Hiya. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Nancy Onjon. I'm design project director for the M42 Junction 6 scheme. I've got a couple of very brief safety moments. I think Andrew and Andy Taylor may have heard one of them. First one, I don't know how many cities have got these electric scooters, you know, like the Boris bikes, but have the electric scooters as well. Bristol does. So obviously you can just get an app and then you can pick up a scooter and go wandering off. They're a bloody liability, excuse my French, for if you're in a car, because they shoot across. Obviously they're not supposed to be on pavements, but they do seem to be all over the place. And somebody raised the other day, obviously with pubs opening up and stuff, are people, once they've been in the pub, going to be using these as a way of getting home now? I think they're sort of, you know, I think they can only go a certain distance and they can't go any further. But even so, drunk in charge of an electric scooter could be even worse for anyone who's trying to negotiate the roads in a normal manner. So that's just a quick one to be aware. I'd say Bristol and Liverpool have both got electric scooters, and I'm sure a lot of other cities have too. The second one is probably more applicable to anyone using the roads. Is, you know, lockdown is sort of releasing now. People are being able to travel further. A lot of people haven't actually been in the car for a long time, or if they have, they've only literally been from home to the supermarket. So I think a lot of people not have forgotten how to drive, but are not used to driving again. And you've got people traveling long distance. And as I say, you know, school holidays last week, traffic news, the A303 was closed, the M5, there was an accident. You know, people have, you've got your normal sort of holiday chaos, I suppose, but then you've got people who haven't been in cars for quite a long period of time. So again, it's being aware that you're not quite so used to driving again, and also being aware that there's a lot of people on the road that also aren't quite up to date with, you know, the roads and being busy and stuff like that. So it's two very quick ones from me.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, very, very good points. And Liz, keep your scooter away if you go to the pub this weekend, please. But yeah, definitely, no, you're right. The roads are still really quiet, and it's something we're not used to at the minute, which is definitely one of the same with public transport as well. We need to be mindful of how people use public transport and perceive that as well going forward as well. So thank you, Nancy. Thank you for volunteering for that. Our other moment, I think Nick has volunteered to give us a values moment.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's quite nice to be able to talk about things when businesses don't quite go according to plan. So a week ago, last Sunday evening, I was washing the car and had a phone call from the managing director of our security business to say that some travellers had invaded a smart motorway site. Unfortunately for me, it's very close to where I live. So I got in the car and went down there, and there were upwards of 50 caravans and about 100 people. And we had one security guard on the gate barricaded into a room. So it's quite a disturbing scene. I was not made to feel very welcome. Obviously, we called the police, who took about half an hour to respond. But the real value piece in this for me was that the guard contacted a fellow guard who made his way to site out of shift to make sure that that other guard was okay, picked his way carefully through the marauding people who were all over the site. Nothing he could do about that. It was then a police matter. His only focus was to very peacefully go and make sure that the other guard was safe and secure. It was you know, an admirable act. I think we all have a very common approach to valuing our people, but this was about one guard valuing the well-being of another guard, and it was genuinely care for him that was shown. Obviously, we've got some awards in train to call that out and highlight it for the great spirit shown, and bravery, actually, because it was quite a frightening scene. And we don't often talk about it. We just want it dealt with. People have been moved on. Nobody was hurt. But I think it is really important to recognise that not every Sunday evening is as peaceful as we all want them to be, and there are people out there we rely on to look after our sites and equipment and our people, and it was a great course of action that these guys showed. So thanks for the opportunity to speak about it.
That's lovely.
No, thank you, Nick. Yeah, really, really good that our people are critical, and we often forget the busy world we live in, that there's people at the coalface doing work that are putting themselves and their friends and colleagues at risk. But there are a lot of people stepping up and doing the right thing and really driving that value. So thank you for sharing that, Nick. And yeah, difficult situation, certainly. Just for the ones that have, obviously, some people might have joined the call later, there is a poll in the chat that we've tried to drop in. There's 29 responses so far, so if people haven't just voted in the poll, but my initial reactions, and Liz, maybe you can talk on this as we go, but do we think as an industry we create the environment for our people to make value or behavioural based decisions? And the majority is in the favour of no. I know it was quite a limited answer, yes or no, but I think that explains why one of the reasons we're doing today's session, to start exploring how we create that environment. So you'll see we'll build on that. Liz, over to you.
So actually, I'm going to give you a bit of context as to why we've decided to have this session. So there was a conversation I had about a year ago about the A14 environment, and that there was a lot of empowerment from client and all of the people, all the partners that were working on the scheme, and it became a really close value and behaviourally driven network of individuals. But then when the project started decreasing in terms of spend profile, program, etc., then people started rolling off those projects. And they found themselves in kind of like a bit of a limbo. They were used to a certain environment. They come back to the metaphorical mothership, and then it feels a bit alien in terms of the values and the behavioural based decisions that they're enabled to make. So myself and Martin Perks, who I'll introduce shortly, along with Vicky, Martin and I have regular conversations about behavioural transition in the industry, and the fact that actually, if we put more focus on bringing the right people in, empowering them and enabling them to make decisions that they know are for the greater good or for the aligned vision, that actually that reflects up the chain into the corporate sort of umbrella companies. So that's something that's quite powerful, but isn't really understood necessarily from top down. So we all recognise it from bottom up. We all know that actually we can challenge and we can be integrated and we can collaborate. But is that something that the industry supports, that our individual companies support? And actually, how do we go and challenge some of the status quo and the way that things have been done for the past 20 years by putting more into our people and less into the financial aspects? So Vicky and Martin, if you are able to turn your cameras on, please. So as Andrew said, Martin works for Highways England, so I've worked with him for quite a few years now, and surprisingly he's not bored of talking about behaviours and values with me, which is amazing. Vicky, as we said, is founder of Britain Thinks, and it was a paper that I came across while I was trying to find some sort of academia or some sort of theoretical understanding that was outside of the highways industry to try and improve the way that highways interacts. So without further ado, Martin, over to you.
Okay, so I'll introduce myself first. So I'm the regional commercial program director for RIP, Regional Investment Program North, but I'm also I think probably the last person standing who was involved in the development and construct of regional delivery partnerships. And for my sins, I did quite a lot of investigation and research on behavioural economics, which has formed the basis of quite a lot of the decision architecture that's built into the model. So that's all a bit sort of complicated, really. And the focus I think that I want to bring to this discussion is really around the tribes that we all inhabit. So one of the things that was really interesting when we did some work is that as an individual, you probably inhabit about, unknowingly in some instances, until it's pointed out, about 9 tribes. So your agenda, you're from an ethical background, you work for a company, you probably work in a profession, you may work on a project, you may work in a team on a project. And so suddenly you've got all of these different pressures building around the things that you do and the instructions that you have and the aligned outcomes that you have. In that context, it becomes quite hard for everybody within our industry, because we have transient management teams. We don't very often. Head office sometimes is a stable environment, but mostly they're transient and moving management organizations. So you move from one site to the next, from one client to the next, and consequently you exist in this space of ever-changing instruction. And in that space, reputation becomes quite an important thing. And one of the key values that most organizations across the industry recognize and hold up as core to their business is integrity. And reputation's built around integrity. And I'll just bring to the table a very short anecdote that I read a while ago, which I found very interesting, which was 100 years ago, 150 years ago now nearly. If you drank milk, you were between 60 and 70% likely to get an infection from the milk that you drank, because fresh milk and pre-pasteurization made milk drinking quite a hazardous occupation. And now we all, when lockdown lifts, we all walk into a coffee shop and don't think twice about the milk that goes into the drink that you're presented with and you purchase. But an estimate is that there's between 80 and 90 transactions between the cow and you. And every single one of those transactions relies on some kind of contract and the integrity of the people that enact that contract. And without it, you'd get poisoned. And I found that a fascinating kind of thought process between the one thing and another. And the milk industry and milk marketing board has built a reputation on milk being safe. And everybody, farmers, processors, lorry drivers, tanker drivers, everybody within that process, the people in the labs, all the way through to the barista that actually puts it into your coffee, has got a role to play in making sure that that milk is safe when it arrives with you. And I started to have a think about how that translated into our world, and that's really the basis of the stuff that Liz and I have been doing. So that's a kind of intro to where my thinking comes from.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm never going to be able to look at a coffee the same way again, she says with one in her hand. So Vicky, do you want to put your screen on and come and sort of provide comments as well?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you all very much for inviting me to join you today. Sounds like you have great sessions, and I particularly love that story about the values moment, because that really is what I want to talk a little bit about. So just to tell you who Britain Thinks are, because many of you won't know us, we are a research agency, and we do an awful lot of work with government, the private sector, and the third sector around reputation, what drives reputation, how to build reputation, how to mend reputation. So, and I think that what I'm going to share with you today is some thinking around that, but particularly from the people side, because I think that's a particularly interesting opportunity and challenge for you. So, I think the first thing I want to say is that having a happy, motivated, valued workforce really, really, really matters. And that's because reputation is built by the people who work for you, first and foremost. They're your public face. They're the ones who have to make in-the-moment decisions. Their kind of instinctive behaviours really speak to who you are. I mean, it's a little example with a very busy supermarket. customers started saying, well, I wouldn't ask anyone in the store for help because they look so stressed and so harassed already that I just need to protect them. And you think, hang on, something's really broken down there. And actually, what does that say about the reputation of their employer? So they're the people who make those in the moment decisions that most of us interact with. They're also the people that allow you to run a safe and healthy site. And I mean, that fabulous example of somebody just wanting to do the right thing and get in there to make sure their colleague was all right is a fabulous example of team working, but also underpinning sort of safety and health and safety. They can make or break your reputation, particularly in the days of social media. If you have a bad interaction and somebody gets very angry, that can go viral in minutes, and that can have a hugely damaging impact. And the other thing I'd say is that the people who work for you are the voice of authenticity. Your chief exec can go out on platforms any number of times and say what a brilliant company or organization it is and how fantastic you treat people. If that's not what your employees are saying in the pub, well, who are you actually going to believe in that exchange? So with the work we've done over the years, just a few observations. Leadership teams and organizations focus an awful lot on the decision makers as professionals. So they will think about the regulators, the politicians, the journalists, and they will think of them purely in their professional capacity, and they'll have brilliant strategies for managing those relationships. What they tend to forget is they're also human beings who will interact with you as real people when you don't know who they are and you haven't put on your fancy hat to treat them like an opinion leader. That's the authentic relationship. So with a very big tech company that we've done reputation audits with over the years, what was really interesting was people said, well, do you want me to talk about them in my capacity as a journalist, or do you want me to tell you what I really think? We said, what do you mean? And they said, well, as a journalist, they treat me brilliantly and they give me all this information and they call me up. When I needed their help as a customer, and I rang and I hung on the phone for hours and they said they were coming, actually, that's who they really are. So I think, always you have to think about people. I think the other thing that's really interesting is you can do all the best comms campaigns in the world. You can introduce all kinds of policies and responsibility pledges and offer to give money to charity and everything. As far as the public is concerned, they are not worth the paper they're printed on unless they see you treating your people well, whether that's as customers or as colleagues. Those kind of real relationships are what matter. Otherwise, frankly, it's just lipstick on a pig. People are incredibly aware of that now and kind of quite skeptical at how they look at organisations. So again, without naming names, I am going to shame one company later, which I hope nobody from here is from, but one very big company who had real trust in their business and their brand, and a lot of that was off the back of their very well-trusted team of engineers who were in people's homes, for quite a lot of time. They were so trusted, and they have completely blown it in the pandemic by using the pandemic as an opportunity to restructure and fire and rehire people on worse terms. That has just completely blown away all the years for the reputation building that they did. So you need your people to be proud and empowered. You want them to speak up for you. You want them to instinctively do what you would want them to do. They are the authentic voice. And I think it's particularly important in your worlds where often the face of your organization might actually be a contractor and they're working in an environment that's probably already pretty stressful. So, if they're unhappy or disgruntled, they're not going to defend you. They're much more likely to take it out on someone else. So, flashpoints are much more real and present. They don't they don't have the resilience or conviction to do what you would want them to do. They won't go the extra mile. You probably won't keep them for very long. So you'll keep turning people over, you'll have a worse performance record, and ultimately you'll have a worse reputation. And we think reputation really, really matters. To us, we describe reputation as being what people say about you when you're not in the room. And whilst it may or may not be factually correct, or it may not be very well informed, perception is reality. So what they say about you is kind of what people really think. And I think the other thing is that you can't control your reputation. You can spend a fortune on people who will say they're managing your reputation, but you just can't do that. There's a guy called Jeremy Bullmore, who's a kind of real guru in the world of advertising and communications. He said, people build reputations as birds build nests from scraps and straws that we chance upon. So all you can do is hope that the scraps and straws that they're picking up are true to you and reflect well on you. And I think really just picking up on the earlier comment, one of the strongest drivers of reputation is trust. And there's an incredibly strong correlation between trust and reputation. And trust is about building a brand that gets the benefit of the doubt. So if something goes wrong, or things do go wrong, what you want is people to say, yeah, but actually they're a really decent organisation, and, you know, okay, shit happens, sorry, forgive my French, shit happens, but they will learn from it and move on from it, rather than, oh, well, they're just an accident waiting to happen. Trust is about having colleagues and customers that speak up for you, that advocate for you. It's also something that enables you to go beyond a purely transactional relationship and towards something much, much stickier. But it's complicated. It's not a tick list. It's a very multidimensional jigsaw, and there is no silver bullet. So we think it's really about deciding who you want to be and then delivering that across the whole brand and experience. And the experiences that really impact when they chime with a customer's sense of who you are and what you stand for. So the positive experiences sort of build greater trust, and you get a virtuous upward circle when they align with aspects of your brand that customers value. So I don't know, for example, if they think you're caring, then personal touches go a long way, and they will talk about those and use those as illustrations of why you're caring. If they think you're soulless, then those very same initiatives are thought to be pandering or token gestures, and they don't come from who you really are, and they have no authenticity. The same is also true in reverse. So negative experiences reduce and undermine trust much more when they feel like evidence of a deeper problem. So if they think you're fundamentally greedy, that every high price will jump at. Whereas if they feel you're basically fair, then they'll give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you put your price up because you need to. So reputation is about two things, capability and character. So capability is about your ability to do what you say you're going to do, so to deliver your product or service. Whereas character is about the way in which you do it, so your values and your behaviours. And of course, both matter. But, you know, the one that tends to cut through and define who you are is character, because that's where stories are made. And storytelling is so powerful. That's where goodwill is established. That's where forgiveness is established. And that's where you get the benefit of the doubt. And as I say, it's much, much more complicated now. I think it's, you know, it's a well-known fact, but always worth remembering that people are 9 times more likely to tell a story about a problem or something going wrong than they are about something working or going well, unless you make it such a kind of positive experience that people want to share it. So every slip-up, every lost temper, every argument with an inconvenienced member of the public is likely to be captured and shared really quickly and will be talked about. I guess the other key question is, does reputation matter? Well, yeah, it does. To employees, it's about attracting and retaining good people who want to work with you, who are proud, who want to be part of your success, and they are your most valuable assets. A bad reputation means that people are embarrassed to admit they work for you, and they're not going to stand up and defend you or advocate for you. And they're really difficult to attract. You won't get the best talent. You won't be able to retain them. You'll end up paying more money for them. And they're not talking you up in the pub. If anything, they're talking you down. For clients, reputation matters because we all want to feel good about the company that we keep. And it's vital in your world where contractors are your public face often. So, you know, it's hard for people to kind of penetrate who's responsible for what. And, you know, they're the sort of brunt end of public frustration. So remember the idiom of, you know, many of you, I mean, IBM is less of a force perhaps now than it was, but it used to be, you know, really well known, the saying, no one ever gets fired for choosing IBM. So they may not be the kind of most fun brand to deal with, but you know what? They knew what they were doing, you knew what to expect, and their reputation was very, very powerful. But I think you also have another set of reasons why reputation matters, and that's for the communities that you're operating in and the members of public that you're impacting. And a lot of what you do actually has quite a profound impact on your neighbours. You know, all the people around HS2 or building of a new road or upgrading the motorway, fixing roads. You know, you impact on people every day. And let's be honest, I mean, probably you're all rather relieved because I think we have a bigger obsession than talking about potholes now, which is talking about Harry and Meghan. But, you know, up until then, what did anyone talk about all the time? Potholes. Well, you're very much in that, you know, I mean, I know potholes are on more local roads, but people don't understand the way it's structured. And so you become part of the same system. And, you know, I think it was interesting, I was just looking at a Comres poll, and only 25% of the public think the current state of roads is good enough. So your kind of starting point is people are a bit frustrated, they're probably looking for criticism if they didn't know that the road was going to be closed and they find out too late, they hadn't built any contingencies. You've got a potential flashpoint all the time. So what do we do to try and help people workers feel that they are part of something that they feel proud of? Well, I mean, we think it starts with a clear set of values that exist and are exemplified throughout the whole organisation, so that they become the guide rails for decision making. They help you make choices, and they help you know what the priorities should be in every given circumstance. So that's a kind of underbed against which people make decisions. And an example there. I mean, do you remember the horse meat scandal? I mean, I can say this about them because Tesco have changed beyond all measure since then. But at the time, Tesco's reputation was pretty poor, and they were thought to be kind of greedy and malevolent and driving people out of the local high street and exploiting their supply chain and exploiting their staff. And people didn't love Tesco. They thought it just to be too big, too powerful. When the horse meat scandal kicked off, everybody just assumed Tesco was a big part of it because it just fitted with their perceptions of the brand. By contrast, McDonald's, who I've worked with for many, many years, they never got a single call about it. They got no mention in the press because all they'd worked, admittedly driven by problems sort of 25 years ago, things like, McJobs, McLibel, they were in a bad place, and they'd really taken themselves to counsel, and they'd unpicked the whole business, looked at every aspect of their business and set out to do everything as well as they could. And then once they'd done that, they then communicated around that. They were really transparent about things. And they built incredible trust amongst their people and their suppliers. So nobody ever looked to McDonald's during that time. So I think it's just really interesting how your reputation and your character can really influence how people anticipate you're going to respond. So combine that set of values with an empowered team who can make decisions confidently in the moment and deal with things as they arise, and you start to sort of demonstrate the character of your organisation. You can start from a tense place, but you can easily turn a critic into an advocate by listening, being empathetic, explaining without being patronising, and you can build very, very powerful relationships. And you can often do that out of adversity. So sometimes turning a critic into an advocate is easier than somebody who just doesn't give a damn. And I think the other thing is about setting people's expectations. And I think that's where the system really helps people, so that, good forewarning about what's going to be happening and clear information and reasons why. Again, an example from London Underground. Passions used to run really high with people endlessly complaining about the infrequency of trains. You never knew when one was coming. They were unreliable. You had to build in so many contingencies to be confident about getting from A to B. And stress levels were rising. You often got very crowded platforms. The pressure on the staff rises. So you've got potentially fairly explosive situations. That changed unbelievably when those time boards were introduced. So you knew when the next train was coming, and the next one after that, and the next one after that. Gave people information, gave them reassurance. Combine that with a lot of work to train their staff and to give them the confidence to be themselves and sharing information. So you kind of now get, tube drivers who will have a bit of banter with you. They'll explain when they stop, why they're stopping. And actually the mood changed, and people now have much more faith and confidence in the underground. And then the other areas, having well-trained, well-rewarded and well-respected people. And this is where I'm going to talk about a brand for whom it's gone very wrong. And I think what makes it in part so credible is it's the staff speaking out about what's wrong with it. And now with sites like Glassdoor, it's impossible to hide how you treat your colleagues. So I'm sorry if any of you work for Ryanair, but Ryanair was ranked the worst airline for 6 years in a row. I think Dermot O'Leary, in a big character, he has a clear vision of what a cheap airline looks like. We all have the jokes about, paying to go to the loo on a plane. Actually, there is a very serious undertone to it. So whilst we can laugh at it, the way that they treat their staff, I think, starts to link to their capability as an airline. So they have a model, many aspects of it, but I'm just going to talk about the pilots. And their model is to hire very young pilots who need to build up their flying hours. And they almost hire them as a favour. So they pay them very little money to get their flying hours up before they move to an airline that treats them well, respects them and pays them fairly. So, as one of their pilots said, and this went viral, the starting salary is very low in comparison to other airlines and is topped up by pay for flying hours. This is a safety issue because if you're a captain or a first officer, self-employed or on a 0 hours contract, and all of those are in play, it encourages you to go to work when you're ill, as you need to get paid. On top of that, we have to pay for our own uniforms and have to bring our own food and water on flights. And then you think, how does that make me feel about flying with them? Doesn't give me a lot of confidence. What are your expectations as you board that flight? And I think really, sorry, I'm going to shut up soon. The last bit is about how you kind of lead the team and how you inspire leaders at all levels of the organisation. And I'm going to give somebody a positive shout out, which is Virgin. So in 2017, Richard Branson's Virgin Group was voted the 7th best company to work for in LinkedIn's top company list. And we all know how happy Virgin people are, how it impacts on our experience as a customer. But I think part of that is Virgin is very clear about what it expects from leaders. And they don't just mean leaders at the top of the organisation. They have a belief that you are leaders right the way through the organisation. And for them, a great leader must praise employees instead of criticising them, genuinely love all people from the cleaning lady to the senior executives, and be a great listener who not only hears the recommendations from employees, but acts upon them. So hopefully that's given you a few clues and a few examples. I'm sorry if I talked for too long, but it's a subject I feel very passionately about, and really happy to pick up anything later on.
It's quite interesting, actually, that you finished on the Virgin point. So when COVID happened, and there was this big uproar that Richard Branson was furloughing everybody with the billions of pounds that he's got in the bank. It'll be interesting to see what the long-term implication is on that, on their reputation and their brand, and also the happiness of their people. So it does show just how fragile a reputation is, unless you're really thinking about the people that are representing you. And also picking up on the point about leadership isn't just hierarchical. We spend a lot of time, especially myself and Andrew, in actually promoting beyond hierarchy. If you've got people that have a diverse thought, an opinion, if they are empowered, then they will not just want to work for you like the standard. They'll always go the extra mile. And we kind of come around to that in terms of inclusivity. Mm-hmm. And I'm well known for using the word psychological safety, but it's something that's fundamentally not understood, but actually is really important in how you make sure that you've got diversely empowered groups of people that then deliver high performance. Companies tend to see this as it's a bit expensive, so why would I want to go down that road? When actually it improves their profit margins. So Martin, can I bring you in at this point? Because I know that you've been doing a lot of work in terms of like the empowerment, the integrated delivery teams. So having that sort of badgeless perspective where everyone's got joined vision, is it working? Quite simple but loaded.
The transition is starting. We've got quite a maturity journey to go on, I think. We've got a lot of embedded customer practice that doesn't reflect that. It's very much in a hierarchical tell space. One of the really interesting things we ran recently, a review of 13 integrated project teams, and within each of those integrated project teams, we interviewed through a third party 15 to 18 people. And so if you do the quick maths of that, it's about 150 people. And we had 7 people who actually knew what an integrated project team was, despite the fact that the rest of them were actually purporting to act in one and to push the philosophy that's behind it of all the things that we know will actually improve the outcome of projects. So we're in that space where, and I was really interested in 2 things that Vicky said. One was, I think most of the things that you've talked around are reputation, where an organisation is selling to a fragmented supplier, to a fragmented buyer of the public. and we're in a slightly different space. We do, as an overall industry, sell to the public, but to each other, if you like, we've got quite a constrained marketplace. So so the reputation is a slightly different skew. And the second thing is this idea that people are right back to the beginning of what you were saying around do you want me to tell you as an employee, or do you want me to tell you as a person? And we get that absolutely across the board. It's kind of, you know, do you want me to put my corporate hat on, or do you want me to tell you how it is? And there are a number of things, not just reputationally, but we get quite a lot of people who over time will see things happening that they don't think are right, either in a safety environment or a commercial environment or a behaviour environment, but they won't feel like they can say anything. And I think that's where Liz is going. We don't have a psychologically safe environment for people. And some of that is driven by the perception that if you're wearing a company colour, you have to be true to the company, not true. And the difference between those two things is one, really worrying. Two, and the thing that we're trying to break down, and Liz is alluding to, I think, is that if you know, we've had quite a lot of change in the safety environment about people not walking by, and companies rewarding people for not walking by, for actually taking action and intervening. But we are still a long way off, and we still get a lot of incidents of people shortcutting. And you know, if you went into legal speak, there's a lot of joint enterprise to those incidents that happen. People watched it happen. People knew it was going to happen, but they didn't do anything. People knew there wasn't a hazard assessment being done, but they didn't say there should be. And whilst that doesn't have a personal reputational issue around it at the moment, it doesn't really have a corporate reputational issue. It's a bit anonymous. And it'll be quite interesting to kind of get that difference between the psychological safety not being in existence because of you have to wear the colours of the company you work for, and the sort of endemic, anonymous anonymity of these incidents as to whether it was you or your company or just your tribe of people. You know, I'm a blue collar worker, or I'm a plant operator, or I'm a supplier of you know, I just come along and give you things that you've bought, but I don't really feel like I've got a part to play in the big scheme of things. And that disconnection is something that we're really struggling with as an industry, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy for people to sort of set the tone from the top and just say, you know, we believe in integrity. But when you're kind of, or when we believe in trust and we want to embed trust, but when you have a situation where you've got teams coming together, obviously there's the storming, forming phases that need to happen for that to become a bit more successful. But also it's that sort of, there's no pushback when people go into a room and then separate out into their corners, depending on their corporate badges, and then go back on what they've just said. You know, so it becomes like a slanging match. It's like putting two children in alternate corners and saying, I'm going to take your toys away. And there's no repercussions, because actually that's something that's been inherently bred into people, that you have to represent a corner. And what we're trying to do in Highways now is that you represent a vision, you represent an outcome. And that's such a huge transition. That always has to start with your people. And when I first, I used to work for a company when I worked on RDP, and we did our people satisfaction scores every 3 months. We were in the room with hierarchical, you know, so that, you know, people were acting upon the feedback, and we were doing it in an agile way that meant that the results were permanent. People were actually really happy to then work in some of the programs that we're on. And we went from the most dissatisfied, where there was an uproar in the company, you know, can't believe they've got 25% satisfaction on this program, and we managed to get it up to 98% in about a year. But it took that really sort of iterative learning, that agile reaction, and it wasn't something that you just thought, well, I've measured it for a year now, and I'll see you all in a year's time. Let's tick a box because I've done my asking. You feel engaged, but actually by the time you come to the next survey, 20% of your workforce have left either the company or the industry. And given that we've got such a real industry problem in terms of the amount of work and the resources available to do the work, and then also the diversity of the teams and the diversity of the thought leadership, and also empowering them and encouraging an environment where innovation and predictability can all strive, and actually telling people that you want complete and utter transparency and honesty so that breeds trust. All of those stop feeling corporate. It becomes soft skills, and you know, big corporates aren't necessarily great at understanding the impact that soft skills have. And those are the things that we're trying to really embed into Highways. And it is a huge transition, because, you know, we've gone from real transactional, you know, the big tier one companies make the decisions, and then it all gets squeezed into the people that are actually delivering the scheme on the ground. They're the ones that then suffer the abuse from people that are using the strategic road network or the local road networks. So it becomes more of a fundamental need to actually do something and act quicker than just a nice to have. So I'm just gonna put a couple of polls over today, and the reason why they might not look as if we're talking about behaviours and values is because we're trying to understand. There's a session in October about EDI, and we're trying to get in a space where we understand actually what to gauge what the industry perspective is about diversity and high performance, and whether it's a nice to have or it's an absolute embedded value that needs to be driven by every single person in the industry. So yeah, they might look a little bit left field, but it's also trying to support Martin, who's doing some work in Highways England at the moment on diversity leading to high performance, that therefore leads to cost and time programme savings. So if you please do have a look at the polls, I'm about to put one up there shortly. Vicky, Martin, we've got another couple of minutes. Have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
You're on mute, Vicky.
Happens to the best of us.
Oh, you would think by now. Jeez, sorry, guys. I was just going to comment on the bit in the chat about BA. I worked with BA many years ago, and the question is, you know, since they've hired and rehired on really bad contracts, has it impacted their reputation? Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, their reputation was in decline before that, but that just reinforced what people felt, that they'd become very greedy and quite mean. But in the good old days, when things were going well for them, it was really interesting because people spoke so highly of their staff, particularly their kind of cabin crew. And they said and if they were coming back from a stressful business trip from some part of the world where they'd not necessarily felt very kind of safe, so getting on that plane, it would just, you could breathe again. And it felt like, you know, you had a nanny in the sky. They were a bit bossy. They were older. Their stewards were often a little bit older. They were a little bit bossier. They didn't necessarily have the kind of fun and, you know, wish of virgin, but you felt really safe and comfortable with them and knew they'd look after you. And they've kind of thrown all that away, I think. It's desperately sad.
I think it goes to show how people make safer environments. Like, absolutely, you know, that making sure that you've got people that understand how they can individually support safer, how they can make sure that other people are looked after. And that ties back to the example that Nick gave at the beginning about the values piece. Absolutely. So sorry, Martin, I've just completely talked over you there.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to pick up Ben's point in the chat about you do have to be courageous if we're going to be in this space. And some of it is about managers and companies creating a psychologically safe environment. But the other part of that deal is anybody that is going to make a change needs to be courageous. My experience is it's easier to live with yourself for making the decision to do something and being asked not to, than it is to always have wished that you'd done something knowing that it was the right thing to do, but not having had the courage to do it. And so I would urge people to have the courage. I think anybody. So there is a group of people. Andrew, Liz, and I are part of that group. If you're on this call and you don't feel confident and brave enough to speak out, then please contact us and we'll help with that. We're in positions of influence and we can make that happen. So please don't feel like you're on your own, and don't feel like that custom and practice, which you know is the wrong thing, is an acceptable thing, and you just have to lump it. It's not. As a client within this industry, we are hugely passionate about changing the way the environment in which people work, and it's not acceptable to be bullied, and it's not acceptable to be differentiated because of something that's nothing to do with what you do at work. You have to be able to bring your whole self, and please talk to one of us if you don't feel you can do that.
Absolutely, that was really, really fantastic. And just when we start talking about these really almost quite difficult conversations on this forum, it makes me remember why we decided to do them in the first place. These are topics that don't necessarily get enough airtime because we're so busy talking about technical solutions, or we focus on concrete. We don't really look at how, as people and as individuals, that we can respect each other's individuality and support people irrelevant of the badges that we wear. So yeah, absolutely. To reiterate Martin's point, please reach out. So Spender, over to you to take us into a fika.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky and Martin. Fantastic, great to hear your thoughts, and hopefully a lot of people on the comments are going to enjoy listening to yourselves. And I know you'll both reach out and speak to them if people want to talk further. I think just to wrap up before we go into the break, I think the question in the poll that we posted very early doors: do you think as an industry we create the environment for our people to make value or behavioural based decisions? And what you've seen from the conversations is not always. We might say we do, and you might see, I'll be amazed if any of the companies or people on this call actually work for organisations that say we don't, because they'll say we do. I suppose the real part here is to get that conversation into the people. And I'm really excited to talk to a couple of our fantastic supply chain partners that not only work for Skanska, but across the highways industry and the construction sector afterwards, because one of the questions I always ask to Rob, and I know I speak to Kira on as well and others on, is that when we want to hire something or procure something from a supply chain partner, as a professional expert, everybody would probably expect me to ask how much it is and how cheap can I get it and what's the discount I get. But very rarely in my conversations with supply chain do I ever talk about price, which is daft really in the role that I am. And we need to be asking, if we really want to make that statement or that question correct about making decisions based on value and behavioural, is instead of asking how much is that piece of plant a week, sir, is what's the value, or what does that person feel like, or what does it impact is it going to make on that person that's driving that machine or putting my pipe in the ground, etc., etc. And if we can correlate the two, so the decisions are made for the right value or the behavioural piece, the outputs and the value will drive itself from the goodness and the reputation that you're building as organisations and as an industry. So I know it's a bit loosely connected, but I know I'm really passionate about it, and I know Martin and Liz are as well in terms of that thinking. So just to kind of really bring that first bit to a close, Martin, have you got something else you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just going to give the analogies. I don't want traffic management. I want a safe place for people to work on a live carriageway. And if I could produce it by some other means than traffic management, and it might mean closing the motorway or whatever, all the way through to cones, that's what we're after. It's a means to an end. It's the outcome we're after, not. And actually, I don't want the working space. I want the enhancement. If somebody could bring it along in a packet and unroll it overnight, then fantastic.
I'm working on it.
No, you're spot on. Thank you for the first session. Really good. Just a reminder to the people that are back and listening, either remember to use the comments box for posting comments or have them built up, because we will go to a Q&A in about 25, 30 minutes time, something like that, and we'll have a good half hour of Q&A. So we'll want your questions, and we'll be asking you to turn your cameras on and get involved and ask things. So either drop in the comments or be prepared for a bit of a Q&A interaction in a little while. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kira to introduce herself and just give an overview of the company itself.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm Kira Price, and thank you for having me on this call. I'm Chief Operating Officer for the VGC Group, and my role is to align our strategy, people and processes across the business. My background is in HR, and so this ensures that people remain at the forefront of what we do. So in early 2018, we started on a project of cultural change across VGC. We looked at our values, we developed the associated behavioural frameworks, and we invested in a bespoke development programme. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the process we went through and what the outcomes have been as a result. So I think following the success of projects such as the A14 and being part of the integrated labour team, we reviewed our company values to ensure that they were aligned with our customer needs. And our customers wanted us to help them find solutions to their problems, to help drive innovation, collaboration, diversity and efficiencies. And so what we did was we undertook several workshops in terms of trying to develop our values. We wanted to move away from just using industry buzzwords and create values that actually reflected our personality and how we operated as a business. So there was lots of sticky notes, there was mind maps, there was a bit of healthy conflict, and then following a bit of wordsmithing, we agreed on the following values. First one is we achieve our potential. Second one is we deliver on our promises. And the third one is we look after each other. These values aligned quite well with our existing commitment to Go Beyond, which is a programme to drive continuous improvement and enhance performance across our business. And so over the next few months, we shared these values with staff in the posters and newsletters on the websites, in briefings, and we had the VGC Go Beyond Awards, which were aligned to values behaviours. So then, having clarified and communicated our values, the next stage was to look at actually how we could fully embed them and develop them. So we had another round of workshops, a load more sticky notes. We interviewed people, we did focus groups, and we tried to define what success looked like at VGC. And so we ended up distilling over 1,600 statements into 12 behavioural competencies, which were mapped back to our values. And these 12 behavioural competencies, which include things like client focus, innovation, adaptability, and teamwork. And each role at VGC, from the caretaker to the CEO, has a competency profile which is used to benchmark their existing performance against what their potential to develop could be. And this framework is now supporting our recruitment, development and promotion decisions. We've then gone on to work with a specialist training provider to create a bespoke development programme, which is linked to our framework. And in 2019, we launched the VGC Academy to lead the delivery of these programmes. We were delighted in 2020 during the pandemic to actually receive a leadership and management grant from the CITB to help us expand it further and faster than we could have done otherwise. So, you know, there's several reasons that we've gone down this journey of cultural change, but it's all linked to how our values and our behaviours support our brand as a business. As a people-focused company, our values, behaviours and culture are essential in defining our brand and making us an employer of choice. It's a very competitive recruitment market, and we need to attract, develop and retain the best talent. And so by recruiting against behaviours, we can actually identify those that actually have the potential to develop, those that have transferable skills, and not just focus on the technical skills, which in many cases we can actually develop over time. I think the second thing is the Competency Framework and the VGC Academy development programmes is actually bringing our brand to life by driving empowerment and celebrating the authenticity of our people. So by applying the principles, our people don't have to ask permission to do things, but they use that framework to guide their behaviour. So we don't micromanage, but we're providing the skills for them to self-manage and be accountable for themselves and to others. And, you know, as the business continues to expand and we have to continue recruiting more people for our delivery teams, we need to make sure that those teams represent the VGC vision and values in the best way possible. So by focusing on values and behaviours, we're actually ensuring that our business model is scalable and we can deliver it to the clients as we continue to expand together. third thing is the programme actually complements our behaviour-based safety programme, Be Safe by Choice. So by combining the behavioural competencies and safety culture programme, we're creating a better quality of supervisor for Skanska projects and industry projects, which hopefully should result in increased productivity, safety, efficiency, and actually happiness for everyone that works for us and with us. The 2020 pandemic actually demonstrated our values in action. The reaction and behaviours of our team actually turned a crisis into what I think was actually brand loyalty. London and the South East came to a total standstill, and many of our projects were temporarily closed, and we had to respond to unprecedented circumstances, like everyone did. We furloughed over 600 people pretty much overnight. We had to support our clients with their demobilisation and business continuity plans. We actually had to help find solutions to remobilise, and all the while we had to communicate with our 1,200 strong workforce every day. We created an online community to share stories and experiences and celebrate their personal and professional successes. What we didn't do was push our values to one side when the tough times arrived, but we actually used them to support our decision-making processes and how we manage the business through this period. We also identified that some of our teams were feeling isolated whilst working from home, or were struggling to adapt to the new way of working. So we ran team building workshops. Our team of labour managers undertook behavioural profiling, and they were supported to discuss the results with each other, ultimately sort of building trust amongst the team. Everyone got a better understanding of what makes them tick, how to improve communications, and how to get the best from each other. And the team actually went on to create their own charter about how they want to behave and succeed together, which was actually quite an amazing thing. And it was great to see them actually taking our values as a foundation and actually raising the bar on them again. During this period, our team demonstrated resilience, client focus, problem solving, adaptability, and seeing these behaviours in action made me incredibly proud to be such a part of such a forward-looking and cohesive team. And we've received so many letters of thanks from our workforce and clients for the support we provided during this time. So sort of in summary though, our people actually represent us every day and are at the core of every business decision we make. So by continuing to live our values of achieving potential, delivering on our promises, and looking after each other, we know that we will create a sustainable future for our people, for our business, for our clients, and actually the wider communities in which we operate.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kira. And it's great to see the investment. I know, speaking with yourself for a while, it's a programme you've been working on, and I'm hoping it's going to see some great outputs and the effort that's gone into creating that environment within your people, who are boys and girls are at the front face. They're at the coal face of our highway sector and our construction industry. They are our reputation, if that makes sense. So they're the reputation that the customer and the travelling public and I see as I drive down the road. I see that's how I see our sector and our industry. I don't see you and I and others sat behind a desk. That's not what the public perception and our reputation in the highways industry is. Liz, anything to add on that?
Yeah, there is a question from Martin Perks about allowing authenticity of our people is a great phrase. Can you build on what that means to each of your people, and have you measured the engagement that informed?
Okay, that's quite detailed. Okay, so
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think, you know, in all of this, what we've got to be careful is not to make robots out of people, because if we want to create innovation, ideas, bring teams together, we need to really focus on the diversity of that. And so actually allowing people to be themselves, you know, there are parameters, there are ways that we want to operate in terms of how we behave with our clients and the way we deliver projects, but we also want that personality and that authenticity to come through, because that's actually what allows people to develop to become their best form of themselves as well. So we don't want to suppress that. So we are really focusing on that, and I think by doing that, by allowing people space to grow in their role, to develop, to, you know, put themselves in scary positions like talking on conferences and, you know, standing up, it's actually creating a line of growth and promotion for people through the business, which particularly when I look at the last couple of years, what's been happening on projects like the A14, a lot of the team from that project are now in more senior positions and leading with highways projects and high speed 2 projects and the like, so it is actually providing that room for movement. In terms of actually measuring it, for every competency we have in the business, there are 4 levels of it. So there's the entry level, and there's the senior leadership level, and so every role is mapped. So as part of the PDP process, we sort of score where they should be against their role, and then we are able to provide sort of next level development for them within that, so that we can actually take them through to the next level and grow the business.
No, that's really good, and it's great to see you're making that step to making that empowering. I think it was in Ben's point earlier about how we make it happen and make those role models or seeing the change you want to be. And I think you're in a great position, Kira, in the organisation that you've come in to be able to, in your new role, to be able to make that change and take people on that journey and believable. And I honestly believe it is. And I think that's a great step of where you're going with this. And you will be first-hand your experience with the different types of contracting organisations across the sector. Some are good, different, and in bad and whatever. And I'm not here to measure against each other. That's not the point. But it's that consistency that must be challenging for yourself as a supply chain partner. Again, working with different companies, is that difficult for you to transition your people?
I think there's consistency of the issues that are felt across the different sectors, that we're sort of seeing the same topics coming up, which means that there is an issue in terms of we need to develop behaviours. I think from the point of view of one of our businesses, VGC Labour Solutions, and the blue collar business, a lot of development programmes happen at head office level, and our target now is to make sure that these development programmes, the softer skills, the behaviours, that is happening on the ground, because that is where the bulk of the workforce is. And as you said earlier, that's the customer facing part of the project as well. We've spent sort of too long focusing on must have a CSCS card, must have a safety management qualification, and those sorts of things. And actually we need to do more development, and that will have an impact on the safety performance, on the efficiencies and the like. And and it's demonstrated. I mean, I'm talking quite a bit about the A14, but a lot of the people that were on the A14 did not want to leave that project, and they found that transition moving to other projects more challenging, but then we bring in the good things they learned from there onto the next one.
Martin's got his hand up. So Martin, do you want to put your camera on and ask a question?
Yeah, hello. We talked about psychological safety earlier. Can you just give a bit of a backdrop of how what you've done has created or not, or was it conscious or not, around psychological safety for your people?
Yeah, so we, back in 2012, we developed our own behavioural-based safety program called Be Safe by Choice. And again, at the time, the tier 1 contractors were starting to develop their own programs for their management levels, but we felt that the trades and labour workforce particularly needed to be developed in this. And so we've got people across the country who've been through our 3-day programme, working with psychologists on the culture of safety and why people make poor decisions. We're actually relaunching that programme soon, and we'll be including modules in relation to mental health, well-being, fairness, inclusion and respect, and adding some of the academy stuff into it, because it's not just about safety. These are the good decisions that should be made throughout employment, throughout life. So it's sort of, safety almost becomes a byproduct of having the right behaviours in what you do.
I think actually some of it's so simple in terms of if you're really sort of binary about how you recruit people into the industry, and you look at previous experience and you look at CSCS cards and you look at degrees, etc., and that kind of determines how you're setting the company up for success or failure. Yeah. If you actually go for that passionate person, transferable skills, knowledge sharing, willingness to grow, you know, and also a bit of experience or a bit of education in the background, then actually you do end up with a different caliber and capability of people, and you're actually planning for 20 years in advance because you know that people are going to want to stay. So yeah, really amazing work, and I'm definitely need to hook you up with Martin so you can do more work going forward together.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that, Kira. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming across there. And it's amazing. Can you imagine an industry that thinks about their people first rather than the outcome, and where we can go if we can follow that. But no, thank you, Kira. That's fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bring another young gentleman to the screen now, who's probably not quite so new in his role, but Rob, if you want to join us and put your camera on, here he is.
Hello.
And just really over to you to introduce yourself and give a view from what you've been doing personally and within your organisation, following on from what we spoke about already.
Very good. Thank you very much, Andrew. So yeah, I'm Rob Lynch. I'm director at Lynch Plant Hire. I'm in an echoey site cabin at the moment, further up the HS2 trace right now. I've been thinking about reputation after being given an invitation at this to speak here. And first of all, what do we want in terms of what we're recognised for? We want to be recognised as a business that is the best at what it does. And we also want to be recognised for looking after our people and being a business where all of our people are our family and we look after each other in the family. That's what we really, really aspire to, and that's what will give us all the joy. Not just us in our family, but all of our people that are coming up with our objectives of how we want to work. There's so many great things that have been said already. One thing I don't think that's been said that I think is kind of important is you need to be brilliant at what you do in order for your values and behavior to be recognized. In order for you to have currency and volume for the behaviors and value that you want out there, people listen and see you more if you're absolutely brilliant at what you do. So that's absolutely the first thing that we need to have all of our people focused on. What makes us exist as a business is to serve our customers really, really well. After that, then it means that we can do more great things in terms of behavior and value. As Vicky said earlier, we don't decide our reputation whatsoever. Our people decide what we are, the opinions about our business. Our customers decide it, and other stakeholders decide that. When we go and try and discover about our reputation, we're going to have a lot of great opinions and great reputation statements about our business. All businesses are going to get that because you're going to have a lot of people within your business that are fully engaged with the business. In order to really push out our reputation, we have to go out there and seek the things that we don't necessarily want to hear about our business. Now, there's been times where I haven't personally heard that much about our business in terms of poor reputation because I haven't been looking in the right places. I also definitely think that within our people, that's going to be our best source of discovering what people really feel about our business. Have they always wanted to come and talk to me or one of my senior colleagues about the reputation of our business? Would you really want to have that chat? That's a hard chat to have. I think over time, we've become better at welcoming those conversations and thanking people for the kind of feedback that we get about our business. And they're the real things, they're the brilliant things that I actually love to hear, things that we can improve on in our business. But again, it's hard to do. And I think anyone, and I've done it loads of times, when I've heard something about our business which is not good reputation, I listen, but then there's always some bits of justification that I want to put in straight away, instead of just being quiet, listening, taking it all in and reflecting. So that's what we really, really discipline ourselves to do. But it is a discipline to do that. Behaviours are incredibly important. And I think I've learned in our business over the years, I think that in the past, sometimes we imported behaviours into our business. So we had certain employees or departments that can come into our business, and we would accept every part of them, including the behaviours that they bring into their business, into our business. And there wouldn't be a reference point about how you should act in our business. It's just you come into our business, be who you are. And I think that that had a bit of an adverse effect on our business sometimes in terms of less good teamwork and then also less respect. So we've worked on that by just telling everyone within our business that behaviours are important, and also standing up to the times where the behaviour isn't the right behaviour. That takes a lot of time, but we're prepared to put that time in. The other thing that I wanted to mention is all organisations are working on their behaviours and their values. And we, as a supply chain, we are walking into tier 1 contractors who are working on their behaviours and values. And I always think about what kind of participant we are to help them with what they are trying to do in their business. I think of us in the supply chain as that we're walking into someone else's house. And what kind of person are we going to be in that house? Are we just going to sit in the corner with our arms folded and lots of things will go on around us, but we won't really participate? Or are we going to be responsive to the things that are said in that house? We don't just want to be a tourist and a spectator in our tier 1's attempts to try and bring great values and behaviours into their organisations. So make an effort is a big thing that we think about when we're working on tier 1 contractor sites. I'll leave you with one lovely story. And actually I've got something about Skanska. So Skanska, I think, does a great job in terms of the way that it puts out what they want to be in construction. And this book is a phrase that I love from Skanska. It's on this little notebook. I don't know if that's the wrong way around, but I love that phrase because we feel a lot about that as well. We want to build for a better society. We want to build really well, and we want to make the communities that we work in better. I was having a chat about building a better society with a lovely works manager called Jack Rook, all the way up at Gox Hill, which is near Hull, Skanska project. And we started talking about social value. We said, look, all of this work that we're doing, surely we should be able to create more opportunities for local communities. Jack was in complete agreement. And I think that this sharing of values that Jack and I had on this occasion on a windswept outpost of Hull transferred itself down to the wonderful M42 project, which Skanska have recently started, and the first Skanska on their own project for quite some time, which we are really excited about. And guess what? Had the same conversation with Jack. We talked about social value, and suddenly that chat that we had about sharing that value, about really wanting to make a difference on social value, has converted into something really good, where Jack, with help from other supply chain partners, has brought in people from ex-prisoner backgrounds to do jobs on the project as plant compliance checkers. I think I wanted to leave on that very nice note.
Thank you, Rob. It's great. So I've got a little bit of echo. There's a great summary and some really good points to see it from as Martin puts it, a micro industry reporting through to the big chain, and from macro to micro. Now, behaviours affect all parts of the supply chain, and it's really great to see. And the one thing you said that resonated with me was I did the Skanska strategic leader program, as Kira touched. You know, you have leadership programs in your business, and we did 5 days away, and I was taught everything how to behave and all that kind of stuff. And I did some of it, and I have learned some of it, honest. But the one thing that I remember that was the hardest piece was at the end of halfway through the 4th day, where we did a feedback session for half a day. And it was about receiving feedback from your peers and colleagues. And it's amazing how you want to turn off and not listen to what people say or their feedback, how you is. And as organisations, we always take feedback as a negative. We're actually the smartest organisations, and the industry we want to create is we take feedback, as long as it's delivered in a non-aggressive way and etc. We want to take that feedback and turn it into the industry we want to be, because it's that feedback that enables us to make the changes if we want to listen to it. And that's where we've got to get smarter to use that feedback to make the change, not delete that email because I didn't like it.
And I can vouch for that, because I remember asking Andrew for some feedback for my PDR last year, and some of it was a bit choice. But you know what? Actually, I listened. I acted on it, because actually, I think when it comes back to this, you know, we are just an industry which is a cluster of people, and that's something that I've just noticed. Martin put, the only person that can really change is you, but kind of reiterates what I'm trying to say. But actually we do tend to ask for a lot of feedback, and then we don't necessarily do as much as we could, because corporates are really hard to be agile. And I suppose one of the questions for you, Rob, from me is that is the work that you are doing with Skanska and other tier ones, do you think we're all kind of joined up in the fact that we're trying to all do behavioural programmes, but we're coming at it from a very fragmented approach? Is this an industry change sort of transformation that we should be doing collectively? Does that make life easier for tier 2s, 3s, etc., to be able to adapt?
Yeah. What, in terms of behaviours, Liz?
Yeah, the behavioural piece, the collaboration, understanding the people, quality service. These are all things that we use sort of like banded around. It doesn't seem to matter what badge you've got on, actually, but
Sure.
It's still something that's coming through. But we all do it so separately that It must become slightly confusing to know which strategy you're working to on a Skanska scheme versus other tier contractors versus Highways England versus HS2, that sort of thing. Is there more of an industry?
Yeah, so look, I think it's way overcomplicated. So, say if there's a whole bunch of behaviours for Skanska, and then I have to read this big thing about Skanska, and then I go over to the next company and then I have to read that. To me, it's not about that. Like, I think there's so much overlap between behaviours. I just summarise behaviours for myself and others in the business is just be responsive, be open, and be nice. And I think the main part is responsive. And you're kind of saying, well, is it quite hard to swat up on different behaviours? I think it's harder to just respond. You kind of assume that people are just responding to behaviours. A lot of people aren't doing that much at all. So if you start with just being responsive to what you're being told, I think you're probably ahead of most people.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rob. That's really, really great to hear from you, and some great thoughts. If I can ask you to leave your camera on there, Rob, and Kira, Martin, and Vicky, if you'd like to rejoin us again. Just really, we have 26 minutes. I'll probably save a minute at the end just to wrap up, but we got 25 minutes. We want to hear from people on the camera. Get your cameras turned on, get the comments in, raise your hand, come and ask one of the panel a really difficult question, and I'll pass it to one of them. If it's an easy one, I'll deal with it.
I am just very quickly going to, there was some feedback on the poll earlier that people wanted multiple choice, so I have updated it, but didn't want to flash something up on your screen while people were talking, so I'll ever so quickly post that now while we wait for some questions.
Thank you. Nancy, your hand's up. If you want to drop your camera on and...
Hi. Yeah, I'll just go over so you're not looking at my ear. I'll just put you onto my other screen. She says, hopefully there we go. It's really for sort of Martin, sort of with his Highways England hat on. Sorry, Martin. Obviously, I've worked on and off with Highways Agency, Highways England for 30 years now. So
Nancy, do you want to hear what Highways England think or what Martin thinks?
Well, let's say what Martin thinks. No, I think you've got your work cut out. So good luck to you, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of behaviours that will need to change. I mean, obviously working on the M42, I can really see it. I've always worked, you know, as someone who wants an outcome, works for the project. Did it back in sort of 2006 on a couple of schemes in the southwest. We had it wasn't, you know, an official integrated team, but we worked as an integrated team, and the project worked. You know, everybody looked out for everybody else, everybody helped everybody else, and it was really good. You know, I've also been on the receiving end of the bullying nature, but I think it's also the it's the whole team, you know, even from, you know, DFT downwards, you know, that sort of, you know, programs set in place or requirements set in place need to be able to be met, because, and then us as suppliers need to be able to say, no, that's not achievable, rather than being asked to meet something that's not achievable, us saying, yes, we can do that, knowing it's not achievable, and then everybody's under pressure from the word go. And, you know, making something that if it's in a state that can be achievable, everybody thinks that they can do it and it can work it, but it's everybody working towards that aim. And I think there's still the culture of, you know, we've got checkers checking the checkers, you know, coming through with, you know, everybody that's involved in a scheme, rather than having that integrated project team where you've got the best person for the job regardless of whose hat they're wearing, and all of that kind of stuff. So I mean, there is a long way to go, but I sort of, the aim of my question really is how are you, or how is Highways England trying to install the behaviours from someone like you, Martin, who's got the right mindset, to down through people, some people who, you know, career highways agency, you know, it's a completely different mindset. And I just wonder how Highways England are going about trying to bring everybody up to the, you know, the way that we want to be, I suppose.
Okay, big question. I'm kind of going to take that on the if we want the industry to change, we've got to change kind of basis.
Yeah.
And we absolutely realise that from the board down. Peter Mumford and Nick Harris have taken 2 initiatives. So Nick is doing or changing operational people through a program called Operational Excellence, and it definitely is focusing on re-chipping people to realise that they are the difference between an enabled supply chain and a constrained supply chain. And Peter Mumford's focusing through a series of work streams in major projects transformation, and one of those work streams is called Project Performance Accelerator, and under that, our project teams are being re-chipped, and they are the basis is understand your strength as an individual, but also understand the strengths of the other people within the team, and understand the strength of your team in the context of an integrated project team. There's a third wave, if you like, which is as the client project manager or project management team, and supported by the internal parts of the business, our job is to take the obstacles out of the way. Those obstacles can be all sorts of things, from community stakeholders to influential stakeholders to funding to government constraints. So we are on that journey, but as you say, we've all got to work together to understand what actually is a constraint and what's used as an excuse for what constraints are used as an excuse for poor outcomes. And the interesting thing, I think, at the beginning of what you were saying is, I don't actually think we know what we can do. I think we know what we've done. And I think we all, and probably people on this call, are kind of in the right mindset generally, and the people who want to make a change. We're in a space, I think, where we think we can eventually do things much quicker, much cheaper, and with a much greater smile on our face when we do it. because at the moment there's a lot of hardship and a lot of unsafe activity and a lot of wasted effort and energy, and we've just got to be able to find a way of, we know how to do it, we're just not doing it, is to turn all that stuff into productive outcome.
And I think, yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think the checkers checking checkers comes down to the fact that there isn't the trust. So that's fundamentally why we have all this sort of robust governance, whether it's actually built in or not. It feels like, because we've got different badges and banners, that we have to actually go and verify someone else's work. And I think actually we all have to be really mindful that leads to unsafe working, because the squeeze on the programme actually doesn't come to the people that are sat behind the desks, it comes to the people that are on the sites that are active. It's taxpayers' money, so we're all part of that. So actually, from an end user and a customer perspective, we want the best. So why would we not enable and empower those relationships to be more trustworthy? And also, you know, as drivers as well, which I think probably predominantly all of us are, we don't want the disruption to the network. So it's, again, in our best interest to have the smoothest programme, the cheapest scheme that delivers the appropriate outcomes. And until you start being quite simplistic about those, it all feels very overcomplicated. And we talk about behaviours and values, collaboration and integration as if they're like the difficult things to try and achieve, when actually, if you just put a little bit of faith into your colleagues, whether they work under the same badge or not, and a little bit more trust than you did yesterday, then you'll start to reap the rewards. So thank you for the question, Martin. If you want to carry on, then I'll just bring Craig in with his question.
Yeah, so there's one thing that I want to bring just around this. Plant doesn't operate itself, materials don't deliver themselves, concrete doesn't lay itself, tarmac doesn't get there without people. So all of the other stuff doesn't work unless you put the people in the mix. And we create all of this confusion and frustration ourselves, I think, and we've just got to get to the plan. And I know everybody's in the same boat. It's how do you take it out? Here's another answer to your question, Nancy, is what I'm doing an experiment. Don't tell anybody. That with Balfour Beatty at the moment to get automated payment. We're using a site as an experimental site. We've got an automation specialist, digital automation specialist helping us. And I don't want any people between whatever tier brings in the product and us. And the money needs to flow through that process to their bank account from our bank account as frequently as I can get it happening in a month. Not every month, every day, every week, whatever the optimum is. And that will unlock a whole load of stuff. I know that I've got 6 people between that organisation and me doing the check-in, compiling the application, checking it, compiling an application, checking it, compiling an application, checking it. It's just ridiculous.
And then auditing it all afterwards.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I did a test about 2 years ago, and on average, out of your pound that you give up in your taxes, if I get your pound, I can only put 53 pence of it into our asset, because the rest of it is used in getting the asset contribution. And if I'm, as a taxpayer, I'm sitting there going, WTF? How does that happen when I've got a bunch of people around me who are all telling me they want to take away that waste?
So I'm gonna move on. So thank you for the question, Nancy. So Craig, can you turn your screen on, please? And if there's anyone specifically that you'd like to pinpoint, then please feel free, as long as it's not me and Andrew.
All right, thanks, guys. I suppose if we'd start with Vicky for this one, see your experiences on it. So is it possible to reconcile the competing values of a client they've obviously got their own internal competing values, strategic part of, let's say, our company, so the C-suite, and the operational part of the company, so the guys who are possibly literally at a coalface at times, the engineers, the operatives, whatever. And what's your experiences of that? And I'll just put my slant on it. So I'm on the building services side as well, so it's a slightly different viewpoint, but I think sort of similar theory, is going to apply across that.
Okay, thanks. A great question. I think the answer is yes, you can and you have to. So I guess within your own organisation, I think something's gone wrong in arriving at those values if they're not reconciled right the way through. Because I think you can't run a good business with the C-suite having one set of values and the people actually working on the front line, whether they're nurses, having a different set of values. So I think to get to values that work, they need to work for the whole organisation. I think then in terms of reconciling with them with a client's values, I think that's a subject for when you're in the kind of first throes of looking at a contract. I mean, so if we take ourselves, and we're, most of our work is for clients. There are some clients we won't work with because we know that our values are so different. So that's just a policy decision we've taken. But with other organisations, we will talk about it. We'll be very clear about who we are and what that means in terms of the way we work, our expectations. Want to understand who they are, particularly when we're acting in their name, and then explore how we can make that work, how the sum of the parts can be greater than the individual. So I think it's possible. I think if there is genuine competition between your values and their values, then actually that's probably more fundamental.
Yeah. So it's almost like if you're addressing the point during the relationship, it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's all about clarity and open discussion right up front, and maybe role playing. So if this happens, how would we handle it naturally? How does that fit with how you would handle it? To try and give people, because I think the more you can give people practical examples of your values in action, the more likely they are to be sort of borne out when they need to be.
Absolutely. And I think that really comes from a space of transparency. And I don't think necessarily when you've got those transactional relationships that you go into it thinking, I'm going to be honest about where my failings are. People go, I can deliver everything whenever you want, all of the stuff that you ask for. And I do it without any sort of any drama. It's effortless. And actually, there's a lot of merit in being able to turn around going into that relationship and saying, do you know what, we're just not that great in this area. So can we have a conversation and work it out between us? And to promote, and I mean, I call it either strategic alignment or strategic maturity, but actually using that as an opportunity to have the conversation because you want to get closer to them. So we haven't actually got any more questions. I am going to put another poll up. Rob, yeah, you're completely right. RDP, I suppose some of it actually has to come from the procurement and the contractors to which you're working under. So you're all good and well going and driving and striving for values and behaviours and collaboration and integration. But if the contract promotes secondary competition or sort of hiding your homework, it takes away that sharing function. I know we've spoken about it before, but if the contract doesn't actually set the individuals or the businesses up for success, then you kind of shoot yourself in the foot from day one, because you're asking people to do things that the client doesn't necessarily want either. So, and then I'm going to Rob, carry on talking, and then I'll shut up for a change and I'll hand over to Andrew.
No, I was going to say, and this is quite a cultural piece. We are asking people to break down barriers and be honest and transparent and change a culture. And like you said, Martin, we do need to enforce this and empower this, but believe in it and act on what we say rather than just being paid lip service to. Because if we don't make the change, and like you said, we're the people that can influence that change. If we don't make the change, we will never move forward. This industry will never change in the way it's doing it. So we do need to, as hard as it is, and sometimes these things are complex and difficult to do, we do need to put a brave face on it and move forward and keep moving forward with it.
Rob, can I just build on that a little bit? So I'm in a slightly unusual position. Highways England are in an unusual position. We're an arm's length government-owned organisation that gets an allocation of investment for maintenance and enhancement of the network. We want to spend all of that money. Okay, so if we have to spend it on projects where there's 20% waste, that's one thing, but we'd still spend the 20% waste on other projects if it wasn't spent on waste. And that would enhance everybody's life because everybody's a user of the network. And it's joining this macro thinking of we're going to spend it anyway because it's an investment from the government. So let's spend it on something meaningful, rather than actually let's create inertia in the industry and continue spending it on things that don't actually add any value to anybody. It's a bit of a different space to if I was a commercial client saying, no, I just want to spend this much money. If I can get it cheaper, then that's fantastic because it improves my return on investment. I'm not in that space. Our return on investment is macroeconomic and social value, and that's a completely different model. So
absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. Any other questions? Anybody else chomping at the bit to ask something or post a question or want to raise a hand and raise something? Warren, I'd be interested hearing more about the comment you made and what you're doing with your, I was going to say feel good indicator, but good feel indicator. Interesting to hear a bit more about that. Can you explain that for a second for us?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's just something we've worked with the various teams internally, whether that's just about how they feel at work, and we've done it recently very successfully on a new ERP system. So it was actually the question we used then was, how ready are you for the ERP system, as we went through the training up to Christmas? And the kicker question is that follow-up one, a bit like NPS, how can we move the number? And it was always, giving you a stepping stone and an action plan really to make those improvements. Just simple, but it worked very well.
No, it's about the engagement again, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's great when actually you see yourself as the fact that if you get a 2, it's not a bad thing. It's what you do with the 2 that's the bit that's important. And people sort of sit there and go, oh my God, I can't put the question out there because I'm fearful of the answer. Don't be fearful of the answer. Be fearful of not doing anything with the answer and evolving. That's the bit that's important.
Excellent. Thanks, Warren. Nick, get your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'll be brief because I know we haven't got a huge amount of time left. I suppose my observations really, around the conversation back in the bad old days when I was working for Molam and the bigger corporate contractors, what we did was we had really sensible career development schemes within that business. But across the projects, we subcontracted it out, or we had labour organisations, and those all operated on their own terms. And it was very territorial. We rarely spoke to each other. We simply measured what each other did, argued about bills and paid it. And the industry has moved on so much so that now as a supplier, I'm talking and engaging in sessions like this. But the real, in terms of people and valuing people, the challenge that we've got is for our customers on projects, I think, to recognise some of the contributions that all of our people make. And COVID's made that worse because we can't see it, and we're spending a lot of time sitting in conversations like this. So I absolutely applaud what Kira's saying and the framework they've set out to help develop people. It sounds fantastic, but where we see excellence is where our customers, and there are a few examples and not enough, have recognised that a workless hoist driver that we've put into place had actually got such exquisite leadership skills. She then went through SMSTS. Now she's the back shift site manager on that job. She didn't have a job 6 months ago, but it actually took the customer to see it, not me, because I'm not there. And I think one of our offers and asks in our bid processes going forward is to enable people just to not be territorial necessarily about their own Balfour employees or their own Amy employees, but actually to look wider across the supply chain and lift and escalate those people who are truly performing well for reward, development and recognition and so on. And I think that then starts to really gel what we're doing individually. And I'm not suggesting that, we are doing it individually, because we've got this leadership forum, we're talking about it, and that's excellent. It's got to translate to the projects now and the works managers who are out there seeing it every day. And we really need their help to lean into this.
And I think thank you is a really powerful word, and yet something that we say when we're in a shop, and we take the shopping off the end, and you take your receipt and you say thank you ever so much, have a good day. Do we do it enough in work? To be fair, I thank everybody, irrelevant of whether it's been a big job or a small job. They've given me something. They've given me a customer service experience, and that's the bit that's really important and needs to be recognised. And the amount of times you end up with a smiley face when you get an email back or a text message and it's got a smiley face. You know, I like to think that actually individually we can all be the people that commit to enabling our colleagues, our co-workers, our supply chain in having that feel good factor in the industry. So it's long overdue. It's, you know, and it's so easy to do some of the really basic good stuff regularly and drive that human factor through the industry, but we just miss out on the fundamentals sometimes. So thank you, Nick, much appreciated for that. So Andrew, I'm going to hand over to you because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, I mean, from a customer perspective, I know Andy Taylor's on the call. I'm not sure if he's dialed in or having a lunch at the same time, but this must be really seen a lot from a customer perspective and the way it's driving. And we talk about historic way we think about works managers and projects being delivered and that kind of stuff. But, you know, a lot of the work is being delivered on the ground with our customer, with our reputation of our industry. And Andy, what are you seeing happening from a customer perspective? Are we creating the right reputation or are we miles away?
It depends, simply. I think it's getting better. Cameras up there, your faces are down here. It is getting better. I've been gratified to hear what I have heard today. I have sort of wondered about chiming in, but it's being said for me, really. What I am seeing is that where we're talking more about the end user customer, the road user, the local communities, the businesses, the logistics organisations, it's beginning to filter through that actually they need to be involved, even if only by proxy, right at the outset. It's no good thinking about them after it's all over. You've opened the road and it's not working. It's got to happen sooner and more quickly. And it's beginning to change, I would say, is my experience and my observation. And I think some organisations are better at it than others.
No, it's great. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for jumping you on the spot there. But it's really interesting to see what you hear in a customer role and your experience and how you see the industry change. I know you're a big believer in making sure that the partners in the supply chain and some of the work you've been involved with companies like VGC and Lynch and other companies on some of our projects, and I know are doing on other projects, is really, really critical, because I don't think we'd have seen that 5-10 years ago, and that real partner alignment. We wouldn't have sat on calls with client, industry experts, contractors, supply chain partners being able. I think hopefully you've seen that change.
That's very true, and I think also Highways England have changed. They've moved the goalposts too. Highways England now have their collaboration boards at which the supply chain are all members, and it doesn't matter who you are. So we're now being invited to share our best practice. We are not invited to hold on to our differentiators. Mm. And so we are invited to get better at, this is working, let's all do it, or this is not working, let's stop doing it. And we talk about it, and we're led on it, and the customer being the central imperative is a really useful hook to hang it on. And I call it the central imperative, not the second one.
No, you're right. Thank you, Andy. Kira, from your side, you must have seen a big change in the amount of requests you get from contractors now to do this stuff. You know, what a different world. We're asking a labour supplier to talk about behaviours and values. What? Hang on a minute.
I know. Who'd have thought that wouldn't have happened? I actually think what Andy just said there is absolutely key, that we're not holding on to our differentiators anymore. So there's so much more early contractor involvement. There's so much agreeing what are the targets, what are the C targets, what are the EDI targets, and how can all the providers work together to achieve them, rather than us doing this, them doing that. So I think that's been a key change in it. And, you know, forming strategic partnerships and working project to project means we're constantly building on that capability.
Thank you very much. I'm going to draw it to a close here because I did promise we'd finish by 2 o'clock, and we will do, and I won't drag you over. Thank you all, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you for the open and honest conversations. there will be some feedback and another poll for you to get involved in. Please remember, we spoke about feedback and how important it is for us to use it. We've heard from Martin and his experiences as being a milkman, to Liz driving a scooter out of a pub late at night and all that kind of stuff and everything in between. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed some of that content. And as Martin said, if anybody wants to reach out, speak to us, I extend that from myself, and I'm sure everybody else that's spoken today. If reach out to us, let's talk, let's communicate and make these things a reality. So thank you very much. Not a safe onward journey because not many are going anywhere, but be safe and goodbye. Thank you.